this piece came out earlier this week talking about the Trump administration turning its sights on robots. So Howard Lutnick said all in on accelerating the robot industry development and considering another executive order on robotics specifically next year.
Hey, we've got a little problem here. You're listening to our weekly roll-up show about AI, but only about half of you are signed up to the brand new Milk Road AI newsletter. The first edition came out this week, and it covered how NVIDIA basically shrugged off Google's major advances in the space. You can sign up for the next one. It's totally free, and the link is in the description. Otherwise, GM, and good morning. Welcome to the Milk Road AI Show, the bi-weekly AI podcast where we decode the future before it shows up on CNBC. Today is December 5th, 2025. AI isn't the future anymore. It's already ripping entire industries apart in real time. Today, Duncan and Patrick break down the two jaw-dropping shifts. AI-generated commercials that cost $30K but look more like million-dollar productions, and vibe coding tools that let anyone build fully functional apps just by talking. From Disney's plan for infinite personalized content to why robotics might quietly become the biggest AI investment of the next decade, this episode is your crash course in where the real AI demand is coming from and who's actually positioned to win. Enjoy the show.
All right. How are you doing, Patrick?
Good. We're back.
We're back. I thought that it would be cool to kind of show off, we've been talking a lot about the demand for AI, like where it's going to come from and just like how there's all these new businesses popping up out of nowhere. I think for people who are less on the pulse of the industry, a lot of this stuff, I'm seeing this for the first time, in the past few weeks on X. So I think it's cool to show like a few of the businesses too that I kind of saw this week, which, are massive disruptions or enablers of people to make businesses surrounding AI. One was this kind of like video generation business. They've started focusing on commercials initially, but I think you could pretty easily see a world with this forays into like TV shows and movies and longer form content. Their founder was on TBPN. The company's called Absurd. And I think he said they were charging over like $30,000 per commercial, which is obviously a lot of money. But if you also think about like how much it costs to set up like a whole production crew and maybe do like a multi-day filming event around a commercial, hire actors, all this stuff, is actually probably a pretty good price, especially, timeline wise, you could probably do this a lot faster than it takes to set up the production crew. So I thought that this was like a cool video that they came out with. It's like AI generated and also like super timely, right? Like this was around the election in the US, in New York. So we can watch it quickly.
20 seconds on the clock. Mamdani has the rock. The crowd is on its feet. Kalshi puts him at a 90% favorite. He hits him with a tween. Another tween. Oh, a filthy step back. But Cuomo's right back on him. Will he pull a legendary comeback?
No! Why did you switch it? Shut up. I got money on the line on Kalshi.
I think that's a pretty good ad.
Yeah, it is good. I mean, so these guys, I think it was the same company, like the Absurd guys. They worked with WAP and they worked with Kalshi in the past. There was a like pretty cool Kalshi ad that came out over the summer about like betting on the underdogs. That was also AI generated. And then there was a sick WAP one that was all in GTA 5 style. These like, they go super viral, right? This one, I think the election one was 1.4 million views or something. But at the same time, they're generated specifically kind of to go viral. If you were paying attention in the election one, like you see characters from like tech Twitter and like the Twitter sphere on the video. So you see that Greg guy in the, I don't know if you've seen that account, like Greg145, like bunch of numbers. He's in the stands. So it's made and it's generated to kind of have this like shock factor from the AI. And also the content is targeted specifically to this like online.
Yeah, very specific. Yeah. And then also like a very specific event that like, and then they had, if people are listening and not watching the video, they had Mondami and Como like in basketball uniforms, like playing against each other. So obviously that's just like not even possible, not with AI. So very targeted kind of niche on a specific event. And can pull in, like you're saying, a lot of these relevant, internet personalities to kind of increase the virality. But yeah, if you just think about how much this would disrupt that industry as these continue to get better, like it looks, pretty realistic. Obviously, you can kind of tell if you're paying attention, and I don't know if part of that is they're making it a little bit like AI or not, but like you could definitely see these things getting way, 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 way better and disrupting entire industries around film. Like Patrick and I were talking before, some of the top movies in the US, like an Avengers movie or something, cost $300 million to produce. And now you could potentially do that, for tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands, or maybe like low millions of, yeah, I think probably like in the low millions, but like a massive, massive cost reduction to what it traditionally takes to produce. And also just like way faster, especially as these things start to accelerate. So, it's interesting to think about what will happen with that. I feel like this is a weird one because it feels like you just get the internet flooded with all these like this niche content. It might be like a bit overwhelming for the consumer, but regardless, like, ads, TV shows, movies, the cost to produce them is, going to be dropping 90+%.
Yeah. So just for the record, these like the Absurd company and this Kalshi ad and the WAP ads, those are generated with VO 3.1. So Google's VO model, their video model, it's their competitor to OpenAI's Sora. So for a company like Absurd, they are almost like an AI agency on top of the underlying model providers. So the value that they add is that they might have some automations or some secret sauce in terms of how to get the best results out of the models, and also the creative direction behind like, here are what the scene should be, which is a lot of what like a normal advertising agency would do, but now they can do the entire production in-house. He was saying, the founder of Absurd was saying on TBPN that they charge like upwards of $30K for these ads, and that they try to like really just churn it out. So it's like a volume game, and they're doing a bunch of variations of the same one. They're running them all. It's like the big question here is, this disruption is going to happen. The video models are going to continue getting better. You're going to continue to get improved character transfer between scenes. So, you generate one clip of like the opening shot, but then you want the same character to be in the next clip, and it's a different generation. The models will get better and better at doing that and making it realistic. But where does the value of this disruption actually end up? It seems insane to me that a company like Absurd is going to continue to charge upwards of $30,000 for what is basically a couple $100 worth of VO credits, like Google Cloud credits. They're like, those margins must kind of compress. There will be more competitors who also have good creative direction, and there will be more firms that have a ton of experience directing these shoots, but now they can control the production all on their own. So it's definitely good for Google. It's good for NVIDIA. It's going to drive up demand for tokens, but it's hard to see like how that could be a sustainable agency business.
Guys, if you're still listening to the show, it means you have a huge appetite for AI and for learning about this kind of stuff. And our new newsletter for AI just came out. It comes out Mondays and Wednesdays too. It's free and it's on our website. So make sure you go and check it out right now.
Yeah, I think like it's kind of easy to get into the mindset that AI might just, collapse margins to zero for like all these sort of businesses. But I think there's like a lot of, softer, just like, the creative direction, like going to Kalshi saying that we're going to do everything. And like for them, it's such a big cost savings from actually like, directing a commercial. They're fine to pay like whatever 5 or 10% of what they would have paid anyways. And then those companies can capture that margin, but maybe it gets more expensive, or they capture less over time. But regardless, I think like this is like these video models that are just like gotten really good in the past few months are kind of creating an entire new industry, initially around these short videos, like commercials, like very high production quality, and then probably eventually into TV and AI. So that's just like another, incredibly massive source of demand. If you think about, how big a business, TikTok shorts, Instagram shorts, YouTube, Netflix, just like the whole movie industry, entertainment industry. It is interesting to see where it'll go, but it's obviously going to create a lot of demand for
It's
AI.
definitely going to create demand for tokens.
Yeah.
You're going to see more videos being generated. The models are going to keep getting better and more engaging, and people who know how to control them will be able to create some pretty cool stuff. We talked about this a little bit the other week. There was news of Disney is about to sign a deal with an unknown AI company that.
But like, I wonder what happened. Does Disney just start cranking out like a movie a day in their
No. So
universe of
the
IP?
idea is that, I mean, you like 100% people in advertising and people in the movie business are using AI to create portions of content. But what Disney has the opportunity to do is they have this massive consumer arm with Disney Plus, and they have this plethora of IP around Disney characters that they have a whole bunch of data for. And so what they want to do, according to the reports, is people on Disney Plus, it'll be interactive and they can create their own stories using these Disney characters, and the entire thing gets generated. So you roll something like that out, the cost of the models is going to continue to go down. So it'll be cheaper for them to do it, and you'll have this flood of cheap, personalized content on Disney Plus.
Yeah, no, I think that is, yeah, it's really hard to kind of imagine where that goes. It's going to be like essentially unlimited content of whatever you want eventually, which, is obviously going to create a ton of demand for the AI stuff, but it's kind of hard to think about, how that actually plays out into society. But we can talk about that more later as these things start to come out. But that's definitely like a very clear direction. Just like you sit down and think about just this one, use case of the models where it's going, and you could probably see 1,000x increase, 10,000x increase, millionx increase from where we are today in compute for just like that one segment alone. The video model, that is probably all going to explode. I think, the other business I saw, which is pretty cool, is like, everyone has kind of heard of this vibe coding, this vibe coding trend, and this is like a new business that's allowing you to do that. I thought, like, for people who don't really know about it, this is like a pretty cool video to show you what you can do just through natural language and like being creative. Would also like to get like your take on it, as using a lot of these tools often.
Introducing Anything Max, a vibe coding app that beats Lovable and Volt. I know you probably won't believe me, so we contacted 100 vibe coders to build side-by-side on Anything Max, Lovable, and Volt. Results showed that the majority chose Anything for design quality, code accuracy, and overall for building their apps.
Let me show you Anything in action. Let's say we're building a dating app. We'll call it May I Meet You. I'll prompt Max, build a dating app with swipe matching, real-time messaging, and user profiles connected to my database. Now here's what makes Max different. While this agent is working, I can kick off multiple agents simultaneously. I open another chat, add an onboarding flow for first-time users to fill out their profile, and another. QA the app and fix any bugs you find. Like a real engineer, it uses its own browser to try your app out for you. So it can click through every flow, test all the buttons, make sure everything is working exactly as you expect. Oh look, one of our QA agents found a bug. The thing is, Lovable wouldn't be able to find this bug because they don't actually execute end-to-end user flows. Max runs the actual app across the UI, database, backend, and API call. Watch how it detected that editing profiles wasn't working. It tested the backend call directly, realized that the issue is actually in how the front end was passing data to the backend, applied that fix, wrote its own test, and then confirmed it's fixed end-to-end.
People are already starting real businesses on Anything. Blake has made a gut biome map, and he's already doing $10K a month. Anthony has made a referral tool for marketers, and he's already doing $20K. And Yuri's made $40K with his suite of AI tools. To show off the power of Anything Max, we're launching our biggest hackathon yet. With
It's pretty cool.
Yeah, that is like insane.
Yeah,
So I haven't used one of these vibe coding tools, but I know you've probably experimented with these and all the agents. But is it actually like you could make a dating app within like a day or something, and the AI, and like through natural language?
Yeah, so you have like this progression on these vibe coding tools, and they've been around for a couple of years, right? You have like even Cursor is like a form of a vibe coding tool. It's less end to end. It's a little bit more like in the loop. But you have stuff like V0 from Vercel. You have Lovable. You have Replit to some extent. The point of these apps is that someone who doesn't know how to code anything can go on, take their idea, and it generates it for them. Some of them would be like only front end. So it'll generate a website for you, but it's not connected to a database. There's no back end, doesn't work end to end, or at least it's not connected to anything. Now these new ones are starting to connect to the back end. So Vercel's V0 has database integrations and can spin up back end functions for you. If Lovable doesn't have this, I'm sure they will soon. Replit has it. As the models continue to get better, you can give more responsibility to them. And now they can actually just like connect it, like write a back end, connect it to the front end, like do the entire thing end to end. So these kind of companies are like, you have like the AI model companies, like the OpenAIs, the Anthropics, the Geminis. Then you have these like, you can call them like an agent lab. So they build AI agents that use a variety of models. Most of them are using Claude because Claude's very like a really good software engineering model. So Claude was like really like the breakthrough release that made these vibe coding products start to work. So like Lovable, V0, they're not running their own models. They're using frontier models over the API, and it's hooked up into their own system that lets you generate this app end to end. And this is happening like for websites. It's happening for mobile apps. There's a company called Rourke, a startup that has had a lot of success doing basically the exact same thing, but they generate mobile apps and it can be connected to backends. It can do all that stuff and you deploy it right onto your iPhone. So this is all part of the angle of empowering people to generate their own applications. They showed examples, like these Max guys showed examples of companies that people have built that are like earning decent MRR. It's interesting to see like you take this to the limit and you make it even more accessible to everyday people. I think in the limit, this looks like everybody has individual and personal software that can be generated basically on the fly for cheap. And in that case, like, do I need to download someone else's gut tracking app, or can I have the agent build one just for what I need, integrated with all of my other data without using like a third party and like using their app instead?
Yeah, no, it'll be interesting to see. It's really hard when you start taking this stuff to the limit, like where it ends up going. But definitely in the near term, as we try and kind of navigate things, it definitely feels like this is another massive source of demand, with these tools being like more accessible to people. You know, anyone can start their own business, basically make something with these tools, and literally all through natural language, which is kind of mind blowing.
Yeah.
Especially like historically, the whole emphasis on like learning to code and all that stuff. And now it's like just natural language interfaces and these AI agents can do a lot of the heavy lifting. Anyways, I just thought that those are like two cool examples that, you know, I saw in the past few weeks, thought we could show, just to kind of, you know, if you kind of do a thought experiment of even these more niche applications, just like these coding agents through natural language, or where these video and models can go, you can start to understand, you know, the revenue projections ramping from, I think we were talking about the other week, like OpenAI is set to do 20 billion this year, ramping up to like 100 billion in 2027, according to Sam. Like that stuff starts to make a bit more sense. Obviously, it might be a timing thing. Like, how long does this take to actually like permeate into the market? But if you just like run down some of these like narrow applications, almost, it's, you know, the demand for them is absolutely massive.
Yeah, I think the projections for tokens being generated from the labs, you can be very comfortable that is going to be a straight line upwards for the foreseeable future. Mm-hmm. The question really is like
the monetization of that.
Yeah, like monetizing, you know, what is the value of the actual piece of software that you generated if an agent could replicate it for a couple cents? This is one thing for applications.
Robotics.
It should. And like that's one side of it for applications. But then even on the frontier model side, like you spend all this CapEx to build out the model. All of the major labs are quite close to each other in terms of capabilities. They're all kind of moving in stride. So even like OpenAI, as solid as their revenue projections are, and they're on track to like exceed last year's projections in 2025, they're also constantly under threat, and it's still not clear how how value is going to land across
Yeah.
the ecosystem.
Just going to sneak in here and interrupt and tell you that if you're listening to this show at this point, you need to like and subscribe. And you know what? Leave a comment. Tell these guys what you think about what they're saying. Tell them if you agree or not, or if they're totally wrong. Stick it to them while you're here, but make sure you actually subscribe to the channel first.
Okay, I feel like this is a good transition into, what's been pretty hot in the news this past week is this whole code red. So after Gemini 3 came out, apparently there was like an internal memo, right, at OpenAI that Sam put out being like, guys, we need a
So basically the memo is that they're a huge company, right? They have like a couple thousand engineers. They have a whole bunch of projects on the go. They've launched Sora. There's ChatGPT. There's the API. There's like all these other like little side missions. Codex. Sam put out a memo saying literally code red, and that they're going to reallocate resources to improve ChatGPT immediately and deprioritize some other projects. So that was on the back of Gemini 3's launch, where the reports were that Google's consumer user base just absolutely rocketed after. And anecdotally, I know a lot of people who switched from ChatGPT to Google. I'm seeing it all over Twitter as well from people that I don't know directly. And apparently on this chart, there's like a 6% 7-day decline on ChatGPT traffic. So there could be like a couple factors at play. Like there's a bit of seasonality in their users historically in the last 2 years. It drops down in the holidays.
Yeah, that was the holidays counterpoint that these guys posted. These guys. So, but what is? I guess this seems like a super random drop off into Black Friday because like people are going out and shopping or something and spending
it's days off from work. It's days off from work, right? Like you have Thanksgiving and then you're going into Christmas. So the entire
I guess maybe like this little drop in July here is like maybe like 4th of July or something. Like you have a drop off or
and
it's like weird.
You see like the peak of exams before you go into summer break.
Oh yeah,
around May. So that's everyone doing their exam prep using ChatGPT or doing assignments using ChatGPT. You also see I don't have the chart handy, but on the weekends there's a massive drop as well. So like when people are not doing work, they're not using these models as much, which makes total sense, right? Because they're using them as a part of their workflows. There's only so many like baking recipes you can ask ChatGPT for on the weekend, but if you're using it to write software, you're going all day. So these Coatu guys, I'm not sure how to pronounce it, saying no code red here. I don't really know. How to interpret that.
Real? I guess we'll find out pretty soon if it bounces back.
The memo apparently did just say code red, so like there was some code red, but I don't know. Like we'll see what happens with these guys. Clearly, there has been a reprioritization of ChatGPT. For anyone who's listening that has a ChatGPT subscription, I heard and then I verified it this morning that if you go and you try to cancel your ChatGPT Plus subscription, which is the $20 a month one, they will ask you, are you sure? If you stay on, we'll give you a month for free. So if you go right now and try to cancel your $20 a month sub, you can get a month for free. So like you wouldn't do that unless you were worried about users churning, right?
Yeah, I went and bought the Gemini 3, whatever Pro thing. Seems pretty good so far, but I haven't used it a ton.
Yeah, it's great, right? And we talked about, I think maybe in the first podcast episode, maybe the second, about how sticky these apps are, if they're sticky at all.
Yeah.
After Gemini, it seems like they're not really
so
that
many
sticky.
Different ways to talk about this. Yeah, I know. Because that was like one of the things, like if you haven't listened to the episode yet, I think it's like the first episode Patrick and I did where we basically went through the entire stack of like, data centers, people who own like the land, the data center shells, the power, GPUs. So like whatever NVIDIA, AMD, whoever's like putting now Google's TPUs, like putting the GPUs inside the data center, people coordinating that, like the hyperscalers, but actually buying the GPUs, hooking them up, like those like the CoreWeave, like kind of pure plays, and then renting that compute out for inference and training to the top labs. So that might be like OpenAI or Anthropic. And then ultimately like the consumer applications of those things. And then, a bit about robotics as well and different, ways of applying the AI. So we said that like one of the reasons we kind of liked, at least right now, it's a space and time. And if energy comes online, that's a lot cheaper in the future. Things could change, but right now, like one of the biggest bottlenecks to this whole AI game is power. So we kind of like these people who just kind of own the data center, and these companies who own the data center and were securing long, like 10, 15 year contracts for their power at like astronomical valuations. And then also we liked things that had a bit more of a moat. So we kind of talked about like physical hardware and robotics. It's not quite there yet, but there's a much stronger moat around that than a consumer facing AI app. And we're kind of starting to see that play out right now with this whole ChatGPT versus Gemini thing, right? Like there is lock-in with memory and just like use, but if someone comes out with a significantly better model and like you can tell that when you're using it, even if it does have some context around memory and stuff, it's the switching cost. It's very low friction just to switch over.
Very low friction.
Yeah.
Honestly, I found that sometimes ChatGPT with memory is way worse than without memory. Sometimes like a memory that should not be influencing the current answer is the models are not that good with nuance. So I keep it disabled, to be honest. And even if you don't keep it disabled, like I don't think it really moves the needle that much. I think you're going to use whichever model's the best. When Nano Banana came out, that incentivized a lot of people to switch over to Gemini because they pay one $20 a month subscription. They get Gemini 3 Pro, which is a great model, and they get the best image generation model alongside it. So, if you have one $20 a month subscription to play with, it costs you basically nothing to hop around to whoever has the best model. For sure. And if it's significantly better. So I guess like that is the big sort of risk to these companies who are spending, billions and billions of dollars training models, and then someone comes out and leapfrogs them, and then if it's not a sticky contract, it's a monthly subscription from a consumer. But that's been the game for a while. Yeah, it has been the beginning. That's been the game. It's like you're going to go crazy on the CapEx. You're going to spend and borrow and spend and raise, and there's just so much at stake, right? Like, and on net, it's doing that anyways. Yeah, and on net, it's good for the entire industry, but it's just like when we're talking about from an investment point of view, it's that makes me a bit nervous, kind of picking, investing in one of these leading labs, or just like because where does this all play out? It's like a never ending race where you're burning a lot of money, and then you just have to hope that the monetization from the users catches up, which like obviously they're finding ways to monetize these things. It's just, and I think the sector as a whole will be able to monetize these products. It's just like who can successfully do that, and what are the moats. And that's why like from the investment point of view, we're talking about, okay, if I have a 15-year contract with Google and they're going to pay me X amount of million a year for the data center shell and power, it's a pretty, clear investment. And as long as Google doesn't run out of money, you're probably going to do pretty well. Then also like the other area I've been spending the majority of my time on this is these AI robotics companies, because if you think about the switching cost, if I have an AI robot that can do the task I want it to do within either like a manufacturing facility or a logistics facility, up to kind of like the certain KPIs that I want it to do that, and I've integrated it and trained it on my line. And this kind of, I know we wanted to talk about the generalization stuff later on, but we'll come back to that. But if I've kind of trained it already and it can do what I want it to do, like integrated with all my systems, it's a physical piece of hardware. The switching costs for that are like, there's way more friction involved in like switching out, what LLM I'm using versus like an entire, buying a whole new robot and then throwing this one out, because it can still do what I want it to do. And even if like a slightly faster or cheaper robot comes out, it's going to be a pretty hard sell to do that. And just like things in the physical world, it's a double-edged sword, right? They move slower. So these companies aren't going to be able to scale up to 800 million, users or deployments as quickly like, ChatGPT has, or I think you said, how many has Gemini hit? Like apparently 650 million. Yeah, so like there's no way that they're going to be able to ramp that quick in 2 years, but at the same time, users come that quickly, they could potentially leave, very quickly as well. So anyways, that's just like an interesting thing as we talk about the dynamics of how like the best ways to kind of,
get exposure to this space. I think big tech seems to be the safest way, but if people want to like venture out further under the risk curve, it definitely feels like the AI robotics companies could be interesting. And then also, some of these power infrastructure plays.
So even with the frontier models, or like the frontier labs, the OpenAIs and the Anthropics, they don't all have the same revenue playbook, and that changes like how their valuation is going to play out significantly. So with OpenAI, very consumer dominant, like household name of when you think of AI and chatbots, you basically think of OpenAI. They like own the $20 a month subscription, and I think like part of the panic and the code red is seeing Google start to creep up on those subs. The other way that they're trying to monetize, which apparently they've put on hold now in an effort to put more resources on improving ChatGPT, is ads. So they hired, they basically something like 30% of their employees are ex-Meta, and a lot of the ex-Meta advertising team. Yeah. Like the people who built the Meta advertising engine, a lot of them are at OpenAI now. Fiji Simo as well. She's like leading the whole ad effort. People on Twitter have been sharing examples where they are $200 a month pro subscribers to OpenAI, and they're getting like Peloton ads in the middle of their responses, or it's like trying to get them to buy something else or showing like something that is unrelated really to what they want. So OpenAI is trying to push this other form of monetization, which they kind of need to do because the consumer cohort is much less valuable on just like a $20 a month subscription than like the enterprise, for example. And as they start to push this in, if they don't do it right, it's going to make their product significantly worse. Like if you had a ChatGPT subscription and you started getting ads for stuff that is impacting the responses that you're getting, and Google is not going to do that to you, and you can get just as good of a model for the same price, like you're just going to churn probably.
It'll be interesting to see how they kind of like elegantly integrate the ad. Because
then on the other side, you have Anthropic, who's playing a completely different revenue game, and they're all about enterprise. Like we were talking about before, and there's something like 32% of the enterprise market share. They completely dominate AI coding. They have like 300,000 businesses as clients, and that's up from 1,000 2 years ago or something. So like massive enterprise scale. And they're reportedly planning to IPO in 2026.
You are listening to the Milk Road AI podcast. And I just want to remind you, we actually are building Milk Road AI Pro, which is set to debut very soon, where you are going to get very in-depth reports about the industry. This thing is going to be so good, Milk Road AI Pro, that we're actually going to be releasing the first 2 reports free on our website. So you have to sign up for the newsletter. Check it out in the link below.
Yeah, so we were talking about this a little bit before. I feel like this business model, in terms of going after, I just feel like you get a deeper integration with companies, and it's slightly stickier than consumer products. Although, like, I don't really know if that's true. Maybe it's just because like we're very savvy on like, we notice one model is better than the other. But like for most people a lot of people using ChatGPT, like they might not notice that. Right, like would our parents notice that? Or
but that's not the game that Anthropic is playing either. Anthropic is not going after our parents.
No,
Anthropic is going after the big engineering organization.
Yeah, well, I'm just saying for like chat, like I wonder, like the 6% drop is really interesting, and I will be like really curious to come back to this chart and see if things bounce back. But so I think on the Anthropic side, they're going after these customers, which should be much deeper integrations, I think, into the company. So I think that they raised 15 billion from Microsoft and Nvidia. I think apparently that was at 350 billion earlier this year. So this could be an absolutely massive IPO. I know there's kind of some rumors of OpenAI doing that, and then Sam kind of crushed those, but it would be really interesting to see what happens when one of these goes public as kind of a very clear pure play of what the market's thinking about AI, versus now there's not a ton of pure plays specifically on kind of the actual monetization of these models. Like you have proxies obviously, but it'd be interesting if ChatGPT or Anthropic
definitely
went public.
And it's
Yeah,
interesting, like they have very different stories, right? Like they both have insane growth, but yeah, Anthropic is going to be profitable probably sooner. Is
yeah,
what it's looking like.
yeah. The projections are Anthropic's going to like turn profitable in like 2027, versus OpenAI is looking at 2029. So we'll see. That could be an interesting thing to have play out. If there is this kind of like glut or bubble type thing, is OpenAI going to burn themselves, spending too much money, growing too quickly? We've talked about that whole, over $1 trillion in spending commitments. So we're going to have to keep an eye on how quickly they can ramp up their revenue. But Anthropic definitely seems like, I think for the sector as a whole, right? This is even what I think David Sachs and the president have said. Like, there's 5 top AI labs in the U.S. If one of them blows themselves up, like someone else will take their place. So I think the overall trend of the sector is, I don't think this is going to stop. I really doubt that OpenAI is going to blow up either. But there are companies operating at similar scale. Anthropic, obviously, more on the enterprise side, that seem to be a little bit more disciplined. And Patrick sent me this quote earlier, but
Yeah,
this was the CEO. Yeah, basically, like on the technology side, he's like one of the most bullish people around, is what he says. And then, which I think we feel the exact same way. I don't think anyone, if they sit down and think about this stuff, like we've been saying, can be like bearish on the technology side. But then the whole market, like the whole concern around the market, is just kind of the economic side. Even if the technology works, there's many players in the system who, if they just make a timing error and get it off by a little bit, bad things can happen. So I think this is like a subtle comment at someone like an OpenAI, or these people who are overcommitting on the spend side. But I think like the whole secular trend is powerful enough to kind of push through. But it is something, I guess, to kind of keep top of mind and keep revisiting.
He said specifically, he was like, some people at other companies are a bit more YOLO about, the whole thing, raising too much money or raising more money, always going after the bigger numbers. So it's interesting because Dario and the rest of the Anthropic founders used to be part of OpenAI, and they spun out of OpenAI. So all these guys know each other, even employees at the labs, they're all friends. They all go to the same parties. A lot of them worked at other labs previously. So you kind of like end up working at the one that fits your ideology the most. And Anthropic has like a very distinct approach to the whole thing, I would say, compared to OpenAI. So we'll see how that lands. But I would say they've been much more conservative with their build out and their raising than OpenAI has. But there's a lot at stake. So we'll see. The projections so far have been blown out of the water.
Yeah, we will keep our eyes on it. Okay, then the last thing I wanted to talk about was, we talked about the executive order last week for AI, accelerating, Manhattan level project coordination around AI in the US. And then, this piece came out earlier this week talking about, the Trump administration turning its sights on robots. So Howard Lutton said all in on accelerating the robot industry development, and considering another executive order on robotics specifically next year. I think that this is still one of the new sector, like the new burgeoning areas of AI, and we haven't seen wide scale commercial deployments, and it's not quite as tangible to people as like the chatbots, because like we're using that already in our everyday life. But if you're talking about another massive source of demand and something that's like extremely important for the US, and then also maybe easier to see from an investment perspective on some of the moats, just given that they are in the physical world. And I think like it'd be interesting to talk about like because when you take the the video models to the limit, or these like coding apps to the limit, or like even here, like Elon Musk talk about it, he's like, you'll just have like a phone and it'll just like know what you want to do, and just like there's no apps, it'll just like generate what you want in real time in front of you. I feel like it's very difficult for us to kind of envision what that looks like. Even, the video example we were talking earlier, and Patrick and I were talking about this over text, it's like, they're just going to be, an Avengers Endgame level quality movie coming out like in the limit like every day. And it's like, that's just like an overwhelming amount of content and stimulation online. And we kind of already seen like a little bit of that in like the brain rot TikTok stuff, just like like just overwhelming stimulation. So it's a little bit difficult to see, how that is going to be good for society, I guess. When I think about the robot stuff and the limit, making everything extremely cheap and accessible, because like robots are, like making all the food, extracting resources, like building things for us, like bringing the costs of like everything that's important down, seems like a much more optimistic thing and massive industry than thinking, oh, there's going to be unlimited like AI slop videos.
Well, you can basically expect that whatever level of capabilities the models reach, any task or output that is within those capabilities will be in extreme abundance, and the cost to produce that will go to zero, basically. And it can take like a couple model generations, which nowadays means like a year for 2 model generations to come out for it to really get super cheap. But you're looking at like less than $1 million to make movies easily. I don't know how that translates into like, will we appreciate it anymore? Will we still appreciate the good ones and just not the bad ones? But the same thing applies, like that same power law is going to apply to all forms of work, including robotics, where like having access to a lawyer will be in extreme abundance once that is like decidedly within its capabilities. Like you already have a lot of those kind of capabilities that are starting to come online.
Yeah, I think with the robots, like a very hot debate within the kind of investor community and the research community is this idea of, will the models generalize into having robots be able to do tasks they've never, seen before, or complete those tasks in environments they've never been in before. So maybe for one, like in one example, it can, go and make, a pizza in a kitchen that it knows really well, but can it then go make a pizza in like, everybody's home it's never seen? It's like, millions of different variation of kitchen styles and ovens and cupboards and all this stuff. So like that's one kind of open question, which I think, people feel like we're not very close to that like full generalization. And then, there's the other question is like, well, do we even need to like fully generalize for these things to still be extremely useful? So if we train it on a very specific data set in like a factory, it can get very good at this one task, and then that factory's cost of production just drops, extremely low, and then we can have, abundance that way. So I don't know if you had any thoughts on kind of the generalization debate. I know like within it seems like it's different in the real world than with LLMs, because with LLMs there's kind of this abundance of data that these things could train on. And now with robotics, there's not like robots widely deployed, so there's not a ton of data that they can train on, and they also kind of need to get this model of physics, which is maybe a bit more complicated than stringing words and information together.
My opinion is that it is basically analogous to the LLM side, and if it's possible for true generalization to emerge from data, then that is true in both cases. The robotics will not be limited by having less data right now if it's possible to have generalization from training on tasks alone. Now, the bear case is that there's a limitation in how the actual models work. Like the architecture of a transformer is not sufficient to have true generalization for robotics, and on the LLM side to reach AGI. It's this idea that we're missing some key piece of research that lets us take the next step. My opinion so far is that people have been saying that we've reached the limits of what just training on data can do, and we have RL and stuff in the pipeline now. People have been saying that we're at the wall for the last 3 years, and we are not at the wall. Models continue to come out every month that are decidedly better than the last generation. I think robotics is much earlier on the progression curve, obviously, than LLMs are. And I would expect to see a similar improvement curve on those. And in terms of like, are we missing a piece? to have AGI or to have like a general purpose robot that can operate in every environment? Don't know. But
Yeah.
I'm of the belief that it doesn't really matter. I think exactly like with LLMs, if there's a task that you want, it's going to be sufficiently cheap for you to collect data for that task. Like if the expected value of training the model on that task is greater than the cost to collect the data and like the cost of the GPUs to do the training, you're going to do it. And if you can reach sufficient performance, then you don't care about generalization. You just train on more stuff.
Yeah, it's just, yeah. So it's like, does it even really matter? Because there's still so much low hanging fruit that we have a clear line of sight that, is possible today. And it might just take a little bit longer to kind of train on each specific task. But like, it's possible today. It's just like, are we going to get this? And honestly, for the people who are scared of like the whole AGI is going to take over, that's probably a better outcome. Is like, okay, these systems are extremely useful. We can train them on narrow tasks and then they can do them very well. But like, it doesn't become a super intelligence that, because you can still get so many productivity enhancements and life improvements, across the world, and economic improvements across the world just through kind of what we understand today. If it does, turn into some super intelligence, I guess that kind of opens up the more like doomer outcome.
It just accelerates everything, right? If you are constrained by having to collect the data before it can do a task, then you're going to be rate limited by how fast you can collect that data. And then you get iterative improvements each time you collect more and then retrain it. But if you have this like emergent generalization where it can just do everything and you never need to train it again, or it's like continually learning, then all bets are off, right?
Just things,
and like
go
the whole
really
game
fast.
changes. But I don't think that people should let, if you don't believe that we're going to get true generalization, then you shouldn't let that cause like a massive bear case in general.
Yeah.
Because there's so much left to do, even if you don't get generalization.
Yeah. It kind of seems like, obviously this is a very hot topic in the researching in the research community, but it definitely feels like for the foreseeable future, it doesn't really matter, because the improvements are still so massive with more narrow models and task specific training. So it still like makes so much sense to do that. And I think that might not be the worst outcome if that takes longer to achieve than we think, and you kind of maybe cut the tail event off of the AI god taking everything over. But it's an interesting thing to kind of keep up on.
Yeah, and I mean, just for the record, I believe that there is some level of generalization in the models, especially the big new ones. I've had them do things that I'm pretty confident are not directly in their training data. And a lot of things are compositions of other things that they've been trained on. So like, does that count as true generalization? Kind of up to your interpretation. All we know is at the end of the day, they're still getting better. There's a lot of tasks that have not had the scopes of the models set on yet. And those tasks will come into reach eventually.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think that's a good place to leave it off. Okay. We'll see everyone next week.
Thanks. See ya.
Want to stay ahead of the biggest technological shift in history? Subscribe now to get insights straight from the sharpest minds in tech and finance. Quickly, you'll note this show's for educational purposes only. Nothing here is financial advice. Investing always carries risk. Never invest more than you can afford to lose. Thanks for tuning in. See you in the next one.